Welcome back to Season 4 of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Join me, Brad, each week as my guests and I share incredible and powerful sobriety stories. We're here to show sobriety is possible, one story at a time. Let's go. In this episode, Torie shares her journey from growing up surrounded by alcohol in Rhode Island. Torie discusses her struggles with self-judgment, societal pressures, and quiet drinking. She embarked on international travels and hoped it would fill the void and change things in her life. Torie recounts her turning point in 2021 when she decided to quit drinking and focus on meaningful healing. Her story emphasizes the importance of the inner healing work and addressing the different layers to life while maintaining sobriety. And this is Torie's story on the Sober Motivation Podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Today we have Torie with us. Torie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Great to finally connect here. Great recommendation from Luke to have you on the podcast and share your story. So I'm excited for it.
I'm excited. Let's dive in. Let's do the dive.
Yeah. So what was it like for you growing up?
Okay. So growing up, I'm from Rhode Island. And for those of you who are not familiar with Rhode Island is pretty much primarily surrounded by water. It's a beach town or beach forward place to live. And growing up for me was a lot being out in nature, being outside, being by the beach. And sort of without saying this, but like being by the beach, there's this unspoken drinking culture. Something about being in the sun and being outside. That was something that I definitely grew up around. Wasn't necessarily like in the middle of nowhere where people were drinking all the time, but there's definitely easy access to those things. And I grew up in an environment where I basically saw all the adults around me drinking. There's definitely a family history of drinking. My grandparents, one of my grandfathers went to AA when he was 60. And so it was something that I thought was so normal. I think growing up was, for me, challenging being one of four. And I was growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. And, you know, it was such a different time. If you think about where we are right now, the stuff that we could do and got away with, and not really having cell phones in the same way was a completely different experience. But loved being in nature. We spent a lot of time at my grandparents' beach house and obviously had very loving parents. But alcohol was there and it was a problem.
Yeah. Where are you at age-wise for your siblings? Are you in the middle?
I'm the second.
Okay.
Of four. So the original middle child.
Yeah. Well, it is so interesting too, right? I was even thinking I recently got one of these Ring doorbell cameras.
Oh God.
And it's like everybody that walks by, you see, it's just like everything. But going back to like when I was a teenager, oh my goodness, like I would have anyway been in probably a lot more trouble if everybody had one of these cameras. So I'm just kind of thinking back to when you say, I mean, I was born in 87. So, 90s and 2000s, kind of growing up too. It feels like it wasn't even that long ago, but just with technology that's been brought into things, like a big difference. We used to just go and like knock on our friends' doors, and now my daughters are coming to me like, I need you to write down your phone number, Dad, so that I could give it to the neighbors so that we can schedule something for us to get together. And I'm like, I guess that's just a thing of the past, like knocking on somebody's door. You have to give them a heads up.
I know. I think about that all the time. Texting was the big thing. Still, but like the early stages of texting, social media wasn't a thing. And even I think about that with my sister and her kids, like, or anybody who has kids really, and their cell phone addiction, because my mom raised 4 kids without a cell phone. Do you know what I mean? Like we would go on our bikes over to our neighbor's house to see if we wanted to do a play date, like freely. And I don't know. It's just so wild how far we've come. And like you said, if I had a ring doorbell, I mean, I would have been in trouble all the time. I snuck out and did that sort of a thing. Kids can't get away with anything anymore.
Yeah, so true. It's interesting too. You bring up that, we talk about it a lot on the podcast, just the overall normalization of alcohol, just being at the family gatherings, the events, and just seeing it everywhere. I mean, was there a time in your life kind of there growing up where you picked up on that? Because for a long time, for me, I never even really noticed too much about what was going on. Is there a time you can reflect on to when you picked up on it just being so around all the time?
Honestly, because it was like a normal thing. Like my dad always had a Budweiser can in his hand. It was like almost an accessory, and I never thought twice about it. And as a young kid, I like had tasted it, and been like, "Ew, it's so gross, like bitter."
Yeah.
Um, and it was just so well placed in our environment that I never questioned it once.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me with my parents, one of my parents just has such an easy relationship with alcohol. Like my mom can have one drink and be fine. Like she doesn't have to have 10 others. I don't think I've ever seen my mom drunk. Like that's just her relationship with it. And then my dad definitely abused alcohol and had this relationship where he would drink beers all day long. And I never really noticed too much of a change in his personality. There were like times where, as I grew older, I started to notice when he had been drinking all day. But growing up, I didn't think it was a problem. It was just sort of this part of this lifestyle, things that adults did. I didn't necessarily grow up in an environment where um, I could like see bad behaviors and link it to alcohol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nor did I grow up in that environment. Like I didn't grow up in an abusive environment where I know some other people like can see the direct correlation. Like it's very clear
Yeah.
that there was like alcohol induced violence or something of that nature. For me, it was like almost more psychologically complicated because it was like okay, or gave me the impression growing up that having a problem with alcohol is okay and excessive drinking is okay because as long as you're not hitting someone or there's lots of screaming, that it's not a problem. We sort of have that Hollywood perspective of it. It's like, if people aren't throwing plates at each other, then like it's okay.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my experience with it. I never had
Yeah.
a defining moment I can reflect on where I was like really noticing it until my mom kicked my dad out of the house
Yeah.
because his drinking was a problem in the way that it would make him depressed in his mood. But like I said, that's what makes it so psychologically confusing because there wasn't like crazy arguments. Like we weren't seeing a dramatic thing play out in front of us. It
Yeah.
was quiet. And I think sometimes like the quiet alcoholism is hard to grow up with because it makes it like seem like it's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think I shared about it on the podcast too before. There's this clip with Steve-O, and he says, like, kind of, air quotes, being an alcoholic might be the most dangerous spot to be because it's like you're not really fully aware. But I think too, a lot of people are looking like what you mentioned there to check certain boxes, right? Do I have a problem with alcohol? Am I an alcoholic? Here's three boxes you have to check. We have a DUI, you're losing stuff, and everything like that. And then if those aren't checked, it's kind of easy to convince ourselves to kind of carry on. So I get exactly what you're saying there. Most people's stories, right? I don't know everybody's story, so I can't speak for all of them in the world, but for most people, they share a sense of it being progressive as to where, we first start out and it's for this or that in high school or college or maybe afterwards. And then maybe we start to lean on it a little bit more and more. And then it's a very sneaky thing to where one day it's like, oh my gosh, this is playing maybe a bigger role in my life than I ever thought possible. When does your dad leave the house then?
I was like kind of at a pivotal age. I think I was like 12 or 13.
Wow.
Um, and he came back, but like had to stop drinking. And I think he went to some meetings, and eventually it's kind of like blurry. Like he came back and then it was sort of like nothing ever happened, but then he eventually started drinking again,
Yeah.
but it was never out of control.
Yeah.
Um, and then he drank for the rest of his life, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and again, that's what makes it so twisted. I'm like, okay, we're just gonna like pretend like nothing happened. And that was part
Yeah.
of, I think, our culture growing up too. Not talking about things, keeping things a secret, not dealing with emotions.
Mm.
And then you and I get to become adults, and it's like we're starting from square one
Yeah.
because we never learned any of that. And, you know,
Yeah. Like how to,
secrets and alcoholism like go hand in hand.
yeah. And I can relate to that huge, like just not knowing even, I mean, I didn't even know how to identify emotions until I went to rehab. I didn't know
Right.
what they were. I didn't know, I obviously didn't have any coping strategies too on like, how was I going to work through these, everything going on, not really feeling comfortable talking with people. And like, I don't think, I talk with a lot of people too on the show, right? I relate to what some other people have shared too. I don't think my parents like intentionally told me like what happens in the house stays in the house. It was never like that kind of conversation, but it just wasn't role modeled for me that we could
Mm,
talk about stuff and we could share our emotions and how we were feeling and stuff. And like it wasn't no blame on them. That's just how things were. That was just the reality of it. But then yeah, you kind of get out after that on your own and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm a lot less equipped than maybe
right.
I thought I was. I was the guy who was like, I can't wait to be 18 to get out of this house. I can't wait to just be on my own. And then I found myself on my own and I was like, oh my goodness, now I know what they were talking about. So what do you do after high school? Like, did you start drinking in high school or was that not a thing?
Yeah, so I drank early on in high school. I remember the first time I had a drink was at my grandparents' anniversary party, and it was just like a beer or something like that, but enough to get me buzzed. And that one, I was just basically immediately hooked because I experienced like the two most potent things when I drank, which was one, I lost my judgment for myself. I was no longer judging myself harshly, and that gave me a level of confidence that I was like, oh my God, this is everything I've been looking for.
Mm,
And I definitely went into party girl mode from there on out. Um,
yeah.
that's kind of where it ensued and was absolutely and kind of have always been an all or nothing person.
Mm,
So for me, it was, partying hard, drinking often until the point of blacking out or throwing up or something of that nature. And, not for nothing, we're also growing up in this time where I didn't even question it because it was celebrated to like,
yeah.
you know, chug a beer and drink as much as you possibly can. Like we saw it in movies, we saw it in school dances. Like it was almost like there was this sense that excess drinking was a rite of passage. And I didn't think I had a problem because I wasn't drinking alone and I was surrounded by people. So I basically told myself that it was fine. And, you know, in a culture that like encourages and rewards over drinking, I just kind of found it easy to stay in denial, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, 100%. Yeah. I'm with you all day on that. Encouraging it, excessive drinking. Yeah. That's kind of where I found my home with things too, was like the keg stands and just doing things extreme and taking, just for maybe that, for me personally, maybe that validation or just the ability to fit in or be a part of maybe circles that I would otherwise not be a part of. Like I was able to kind of slide in and build relationships based off of things that looking back, that's what it was all about. There wasn't that part of me that was like, I just love the taste of Bush Light so much that I'm just going to drink it out of this, canister that we had in a garbage can with ice in it. It was not that at all, but it was that I think I got a rush from fitting in. My entire previous life before my drinking career started, I felt like I was really on the outside of sort of the outskirts of the world.
Mm,
And so this kind of gave, me personally a place to plug in, an identity. And I
mm,
think that that was really, even getting further down the road, like something I really struggled with. Who was I without this thing that, crept into my life and checked so many boxes for me, but was also becoming a really slippery slope. But at first, it's like, yeah, we surround ourselves with other people doing it. It's like, yeah. And I mean, we see it kind of in other areas in our life. And it's like, yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of doing it. That's what I believed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's massively a social crutch. It gives you a false sense of confidence. And not for nothing, it was also like a big anti anxiety hack for me. Like, I would take shots sometimes if I had to do like a school presentation and was too worked up about it, because it'll chill you out.
Yeah. So like that, some people talk or refer to it as like self medicating too.
Right.
In a sense, yeah. And I mean, I did too. I had I can relate to so much of the stuff you're saying, Tori. You're sharing some of my story over there. I had
We could have gone to high
ADHD.
school together.
Yeah, exactly. I had ADHD growing up, and I had this bright idea. I was on all kind of medications, and I was on Adderall at one point, and I had this bright idea in high school one day that I would skip out on taking a dose, and everything in my life changed kind of in that day. And I stopped taking it from there, but my parents thought I was still taking it. And being extremely impulsive, anxious, everything came back. And I'd been on the medication for years. Like I remember even in middle school going to the office, going to the office like twice a day before they
Oh
had before they had like the extended release type medication. You'd
nuts.
have to, yeah, you'd have to go up there and get the medication. So all that stuff came flooded in. And I think what the alcohol really a big purpose it solved in my life in the early days was it quieted those voices. It quieted that 24/7 chatter about not being good enough or all the anxiety and all the doom. And like for me anyway, I felt a sense of pressure. After high school, I had to have my entire life figured out.
Mm.
What do you meet with the counselor, right? What do you want to do with your life, young man? And I wasn't academically doing well. Like I knew that. I never did well for school. So it was like I kind of felt left behind from everybody who was going to school. So I gravitated towards other people like me who weren't going necessarily to school right away, like I did further down the road. But yeah, can relate with that huge. One thing that you shared there earlier that really stood out to me was kind of that inner critic. I think you talk about like that judgment, quieting sort of that down. Was that something you dealt with like all while growing up, or since you can remember anyway?
Yeah, I don't think I had the conscious awareness at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely, like, I think there was just a period of time growing up where I really questioned myself and I felt really unsure of who I was and my level of intelligence. I had four siblings, so that's like a struggle in itself to keep yourself distinct and afloat. Even though my parents, like I said, extremely loving, like
Yeah.
beautiful uh, people, but that was hard, And I also, similarly to you, was not great at school. And early on, I remember being in a reading class and having to like get special help with reading, not because I'm incapable or had necessarily a learning disability.
Yeah.
It was when I like switched schools and had to do some evaluations and whatever. And I immediately felt so stupid. I was like, I'm dumb. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but you know, at the time you think something is. Like if you're slow at learning XYZ, that you're broken. And I think I was in like second grade. And so it shattered my confidence. And I also had this crazy teacher who legally, this should never have been allowed, but um, she just really bullied kids. This was in third grade, and she would make me so nervous before school that I would like throw up every day before school.
Mm.
And my mom would just like keep trying to push me along. We couldn't switch me out of this teacher's class. And she made me feel stupid. Like I said, like I would not talk, like I was very quiet. And she pulled my parents aside thinking that there was something wrong with me because I was scared shitless or so scared that I couldn't talk. And one day, and I'll never forget this, she called me up to the front of the room to answer a question, like a math problem on the board. And I was so scared and I froze and I was just like facing the wall and just couldn't even process it. And she said, let's all take a nap while Torie tries to figure out the problem.
Jeez.
And I was just so mortified. And on top of already like not liking school, adding like a teacher who is going to bully you and make you sick to your stomach when you're like 8 years old is not really going to help. So that kind of like added to, I think, the self-confidence issues that I probably had as a younger kid. And then, like how the system works. It's not meant to lift people up, not everybody learns in the same way. Some people
Yeah.
are more emotionally intelligent and we only get rewarded for working like an employee by following rules. Like, let's be honest, like if you think about everything that we learned, how
Yeah.
many hours did I waste learning calculus? How many hours did I waste like reading literature that didn't light me up at all whatsoever? There's so much time wasted. And the fact that we were shamed or made to feel like a problem or like put in small special groups to like force that stuff down our throats, to me, I'm like, that's terrible. Like, of course,
Yeah.
that's going to make us into adults that have problems. If you don't fit into the system, you're going to have problems down the line because, it just beats you up. So that was
Yeah.
kind of more or less how I suppose it started.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties into, in one way or another, what you shared before of like the alcohol provides that false sense of confidence, right?
Mm,
So it's kind of like checking that box for us. I mean, I can relate to all that stuff, obviously. I had so many troubles in school. When I look back to you feel like I did anyway when I was in high school. I couldn't see past Friday night. Like I didn't have the awareness or the ability to envision anything beyond Friday night, the
mm,
football games, what we're going to hang out with friends and what that was going to look like. And I couldn't see the bigger picture of things. And it really was a challenge to make things work, because my parents too, they wanted me to do well. Like, of course, right? Your parents want you to do well. And so there was friction there, or friction in the classroom. And that's kind of like the tail end of high school when I just became like this sort of class clown.
mm.
I wasn't aware of any of this at the time, but that I was just going to get attention and kind of do things my way, which obviously came with a lot of problems. Where did things go for you after high school?
So I went to college and honestly, I like started getting bored drinking and partying because I started so early in high school. And a
Yeah.
lot of people wait for the partying for college or whatever. And I kind of, started at the beginning of high school. Um, and I continued to drink. I did a lot of like international travel and studying abroad. Um, and it wasn't until after college that things kind of started to like go downhill in the sense that the reality of student loan debts and working a desk job and realizing that wasn't for me and never really having the opportunity to like evaluate that before. It was just like, oh, you're going to college. There was no take a year off or whatever. I ended up studying abroad, which was sort of my way of doing that. But
Yeah.
there was never any contemplative moment where I was like, hey, think about what it might feel to have like thousands of dollars worth of debt after you complete this degree and like whether you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever get that opportunity to sit down and reflect on that, or we didn't back then. And so it was a harsh reality when I found myself stuck in a situation that I didn't want to be in. Um, and I started drinking more solo. I didn't really like socializing anymore and drinking. I was like over the partying scene. Like
Yeah.
it just kind of like didn't do it for me anymore. But it was when I was completely lost, disconnected from my purpose, and just like overwhelmed by this debt that I started like drinking quietly alone. And
Mm.
it didn't feel wrong, at the time, because everywhere I turned, alcohol was still being offered. Like even in the corporate world, it's glamorized, like
Yeah.
brunch, airport lounges, work events, whatever we see in movies and TV, like business class flights. Like it was always there, so it made it really easy for me to justify like drinking alone. And you know, I think it was to help to obviously numb myself. But at some point, I thought maybe if I changed my environment, like I could shake this.
Yeah.
So I actually made a big move. I moved out to Australia and I lived there and I backpacked Southeast Asia for a while. Um, And I went through long periods where I didn't drink at all, sometimes like 6 weeks or even like months at a time. But then I would find myself daydreaming and romanticizing drinking and watching other people and thinking, I can have one or two. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I can ease back into this slowly and just not overdo it until I inevitably eventually kept overdoing it, and then would just go too far. Um, and I didn't necessarily, like I said, think I had a problem, but I like started to recognize, like I said, that I didn't do well with it. That like, okay, like I'm not partying anymore. Like I shouldn't be drinking so much that I'm getting hungover. And I think like it was in those moments where I was like stopping and then starting again that I started to realize that I might actually have a problem. But it took me like nearly a decade from like that realization, that point on to finally quit. It was never this like big dramatic rock bottom moment. Um, I just like started to suspect that like drinking by myself probably wasn't good, but I knew that I could not drink for long periods of time. So I felt like it was okay, but it was almost like more twisted psychologically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I felt like I had
Yeah.
control over it and like gave myself permission to like occasionally drink and like go so hard that I would forget everything that happened.
Yeah.
But that's still like not okay. You know what I mean? Obviously, learning that later.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, a lot of people share about that too, about like the wheels are not completely falling off. So
Right.
it's like in that middle ground. I was the same way. A lot of times it wasn't a problem drinking. It didn't end up in, negative stuff. But then I never really knew when that was going to be the case or when it was going to be the other way, where I was going to just push it way too far, drink way too much, and kind of rinse and repeat the cycle. So you're going through all this. How old were you when you went to Australia and did the backpacking and stuff?
I did that from like 23 to 25.
Okay.
And also while I was doing all of that and like not working a desk job anymore, I was in hospitality. And I've been in hospitality since my first job. So working at restaurants. And if you've
Yeah.
worked in restaurants, you know
Yeah.
that it is laced with alcoholism and drug addiction. And I wasn't necessarily like, I mean, I was definitely partying with coworkers.
Yeah.
But like that was something else that made me think it was okay. I
Yeah.
was literally serving it to people. It was part of my job. It was how I made money. It was like the permission slip for me to like get completely wasted.
Yeah. Oh, the restaurants too. Yeah, I've got a lot of experience in the restaurants, and you're right about that. Is it a lot of people there? I want to say everybody, but a lot of people there. They were, when I was younger, I started working there at like maybe 18 at this restaurant. And a lot of people else worked there. Might have been in their 30s or something, and we kind of hung out. It was like a crew.
Right.
After your shift, yeah, where are we going tonight? What place is open late? We're going to shoot pool. We're going to do this. Even though I wasn't of age, I mean, everybody knew somebody, right? So all the bartenders. I mean, I worked in the kitchen, but all the bartenders and everywhere, everybody, they knew each other. So it wasn't like there wasn't a problem. And it was, it's so interesting to look back too on, that's, I think, too, for me, like, that's what I gravitated towards. Cause like whether they were kind of co-signing my BS in a sense about
Mm,
this lifestyle, right? Of how to live. And I looked up to it. I mean, I'll be honest. I looked up to the kind of the way they were living now in my life. I wouldn't want to be living like that. But at the time I was like, this is cool. Like these guys, we start work at 4, we work till maybe midnight, 1 o'clock. We go out, we stay out till 3, 4 in the morning. We're, building connections, we're meeting people. Like, I mean, come on. At that time of my life, it's crazy to say it now, but I could not have envisioned a better life. I thought it was just the most incredible thing. You always have, friends. I mean, I use that term a little bit loosely there, but you always have friends. You always have somebody to hang out with. There's always somebody who wants to kick it, to
mm,
party, to do whatever. And you just feel like you're just so important. I did anyway. I felt like, man, I'm just so important to all of these people. Then you realize I did anyway when I sobered up. It was like, okay, maybe a lot of those relationships were built on quicksand because they didn't last very long. So I'm with you on that too, the hospitality thing. And, I think a lot of people can relate with that too about being in the mix, the scheduling, and everything. And it's just like further reinforces that idea that, I think because we're looking for that too. I think we're looking for this to be okay. Like, we
mm.
don't want to say, like, the way I'm living is like, too far out of bounds. So I did anyway. I looked for people, whether it was conscious or not. I don't exactly know at the time, but I was looking for people that were living the way I did so that I think it made sense to me to continue living the way I did.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. There's some sort of like bond that happens in hospitality, like because you're commiserating together and you're dealing with like heavy stuff. When you're in hospitality, depending on the environment, I mean, it's high pressure and you work in a team in a way different way, like experience. And like you said, the partying is a part of it. But there's some sort of like bondage that happens between you and those people, and it's very different. And again, it reinforces, like you said it perfectly, the permission slip
Yeah.
for drinking.
Yeah.
But they become family. Like that's the beauty and also like the downfall of hospitality is like they're kind of your like work dysfunctional family. Um, but I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hospitality is like, I mean, I still do it just in a different context.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's the thing too is I look back and at the time I was like everybody's doing this, but I can look back too and like be honest about it now. There was like half and half. Some people were partaking, and the other half just kind of went home and did their thing too. But I wasn't really interested in hanging out with the other half
Mm,
of
I know.
people. I wanted the excitement and what felt like the thrill of everything, the thrill of the unknown, and it,
Well, that was kind of like your college experience, I would assume, because you said you didn't go right off to school.
yeah, college too. Yeah, college was it's the same. It was the same. Yeah, I mean, we got plugged in. I was living well right before I went to. Well, no, I was already in college, but I was dating this girl, and we were living together. It was my first apartment. I got this apartment right at a high school-ish kind of. I graduated high school from a rehab, so it wasn't like a traditional high school, but moved back home and was actually doing well in life. And I was living with this girl and um, started going to college, and then after her and I broke up, and I had a buddy of mine move in. That was really a downfall,
Ooh.
a downfall thing. A buddy of mine moved in, and that's when we just started partying. We partied every night. I mean, we went to a party literally every single night. I'd get off from the restaurant. All my buddies would be there waiting for me. I think I was the only one in the group with a job. The other ones had rich parents. So they kind of,
Oh my
they
God.
had money. So I had a job. So they'd wait for me. I'd show up, greasy smelling, t-shirt. I'd take that off. I'd grab a beer out of the fridge and I'd go for a shower, and halfway through I'd yell out, "Hey, grab me another beer." Like I couldn't go. I couldn't go out. There was so much anxiety and insecurities. But once I had a couple drinks, like I was on top of the world, but I had to make sure. And that's kind of like college too. And I mean, you can only live like that for so long. I wasn't able to keep things between the lines. A lot of the buddies I hung out with, they were able to do, and I was always fascinated by this. I could never understand it. How can you guys still go to school, still work, still have these relationships in your life, not lose your jobs, not get kicked out of school, do well? I couldn't understand it. I got academic probation time after time, eventually got kicked out of college, failed so many courses, wasted so much money try to like keep up with the party lifestyle and, my academics. And of course, like the party always, was the priority, because it checked so many other boxes for me in life. It wasn't like I just loved to party, but I was just looking to escape, I think, my reality. And that was the kind of the magical doorway to do it. But people around me were able to keep things decently together. And I was like, what the heck, guys? Like, fill me in on the secret here. But I was drinking. When I look back, I was drinking and eventually using drugs for completely different reasons than what they were
Right.
for. I had stuff that wasn't healed from the past. It wasn't like, I talk with a lot when I share my story too. Like, not that I was destined to struggle with substances, but I was on a path in life to find some sort of escape from myself.
Hmm.
And it just so happened, it was almost perfect timing in a sense that these things popped up in my life when they did. And it made a whole heck of a lot of sense, as opposed to when I was younger and my grandfather gave me a sip of his beer, on a tailspin. So it was really interesting kind of reflecting there, on those times when it played such an important role in my life.
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy time. I think when we're in it, we're like, this is the best time of my life. Like, I don't want to ever get older. And now I'm like, wow, thank God I'm not there. Like, here's where life has been the best.
Yeah.
Um, but
Oh,
yeah, I think, yeah.
100%. Yeah. So moving forward there, I mean, where did things go for you? And, how do you end up making this change? And like, when does it happen for you?
Yeah, so at this point, I think I like have it dialed in, but also would like in my dream life love to never drink, but it's not cool at this point. At this point, I'm back from Australia. I'm trying to figure my life out. I really got into studying herbal medicine. I've always been very health focused. I actually started my first jobs were in the health and wellness industry before I realized like even those businesses, the ones that are, you know, supposedly doing good for the environment and all that other jazz, that I could not spend my life making someone else's dream come true. And I think that's what led me to do all the traveling and living abroad was like, I wanted to make a bigger impact. And I've always been about health and wellness and, finding ways to make people live healthier. And while I was in Southeast Asia in Australia, I was studying things like yoga and, like I said, herbal medicine and astrology and all these different, I guess, alternative healing methodologies. And when I came back, I really wanted to put it all together. But like I said, I've come back from Southeast Asia at this point in Australia. All of my friends are like 5 years deep into a career
Yeah.
saving up for their first house. And I come home and I'm studying herbal medicine, which is sort of this hoopty thing, while working at a restaurant. And I just remember some guy that I was waiting on at the bar and telling him about my herbal studies and him being like, when are you going to get a real job? And I just felt terrible. Like I was definitely depressed and I really wanted to do something bigger than myself, but I didn't know what that was. And so I was trying to piece all of these things together, educating myself. I started infusing a bunch of different herbal tonics behind the bar at this bar job that I had.
Mm.
And people were really responding to it. And this was back in like 2015. Um, and doing all of these different workshops with infusions and alcohol, and thinking to myself, again, trying to convince myself out of the fact that I have a problem. Wow, alcohol has such a rich history in herbalism. You can literally see it all over the world. Limoncello has a back note of bitterness in it from the lemon peels that's supposed to help with digestion. If you go to Greece, they have ouzo that's anise based. Again, a really therapeutic herb that's great for digestion. Or you can go to uh, the Netherlands, they have absinthe that has wormwood in it. That's a really great anti-parasitic herb. And started to discover how the history of drinking is really rooted in medicinal herbalism, but it wasn't meant to be abused. And that's like the part that kind of went missing is cool. Yeah. You know, you can use alcohol to extract the medicinal properties of herbs. And I love this idea of creating beautiful homemade herbal elixirs with alcohol. But I had the all or nothing attitude, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter if I had it dialed in and was like taking all of these antioxidant supplements every time after I drank to prevent a hangover. It didn't matter if I was drinking a homemade herbal liqueur that wasn't as bad for me. I still had a problem.
Mm. Mm.
And I think a lot of people don't know that about alcohol. And that's not supposed to be a permission slip for people to drink, but that was like the true intention. And they actually started like banning alcohol in history during the time when people were drinking gin and tonics. Tonic water was supposed to be really great for quinine, or for the quinine in it, which is the compound that's anti-malarial. And all the times in history when alcohol was banned, it was because people were like crazy drunks. You know, they weren't using it the way that it should. Not for nothing, they were dealing with issues that like I would definitely be drinking over. You know, people are like getting killed for crazy reasons and getting crazy diseases, and it was just the Wild West and super rogue. But again, I gave myself this illusion that if I center it in health, it's not as bad, or it's okay. And, you know, I built a career on it. In 2020, like I started teaching these online workshops and classes where we would drink herbal mocktails and cocktails, but it was cocktails at first. Like that was my focus.
Yeah.
I got really great corporate gigs. I got the attention of like some really great companies, because up until that point, I was just kind of in hospitality, you know, studying clinical herbalism, studying astrology or yoga, and I was still in the student phase. And then when 2020 happened, I pretty much had no choice but to like make my own thing happen. And that's when I started teaching the classes and workshops virtually. And again, that gave me validation because I was making money doing this for big businesses. But I knew that like after every online class I did, I was like finishing off the drink and then drinking more. And I didn't really have this like one pivotal rock bottom moment, but basically for me, what happened was I had some drinks with a friend and we just like, drank too much. I remember waking up just being really hungover. And I just kind of had this moment where it was sort of quiet and I felt empty spiritually, empty emotionally, empty energetically. And I just knew that in my bones, I was starting to build this beautiful business and getting somewhere, doing something unconventional. Like I wasn't working in a corporate gig, but I knew that I would never reach my full potential if I kept doing it. And I basically stopped. And the last time I had a drink was 2021. And I haven't drinking since. So that was like 4 years ago now.
Wow.
And, you know, like I said, it was tricky. It was psychological. It was quiet, my relationship with alcohol. And I had tried in every way possible to convince myself that I could make it healthy and that I could make it work. And I still couldn't. And so I just gave it up. And, you know, there were other things that kind of led to that. I think during 2020, it was like a very pivotal year for me. My dad had passed that year. I had like some very challenging breakups that happened. And I had started working with a therapist and really like pulling back the layers on codependency, pulling back the layers on the relationship and my family dynamic, like really finally looking at it. And I think that's what helped me finally give it up as well, was the fact that it's not just about quitting alcohol and replacing it with a fancy mocktail. It's about like the true healing, the peeling back of the layers, and really understanding where that's coming from. Like you mentioned earlier, the anxiety was one big thing. You know, the anxiety from school and social situations and, you know, being in a big family and having hard things happen with parents,
Mm.
you know, when you're young, and your family dynamic is, you know, something that if you're on the healing path in one way or another have had to peel back the layers on. And just like being really real with myself about, you know, how much I've like avoided it, in that I've tried everything to convince myself that this was okay to do. And I think that brought me to kind of some even darker moments, because I think we don't quit for just one reason. It's never like, oh yeah, of course I have an all or nothing complex. Or yeah, like there's a lot of trauma underneath it. And it's never just the parents, it's never just the social experiences, it's always layered. And I think the darkest part that I uncovered with my therapist before, like, really, I guess, giving the full, like, effort or realization into healing is I'm debating whether I want you to even like say this or like air this, but like here's the part that I rarely say out loud, and it's not just my sobriety story. I think this is in so many other people's stories too. But like a lot of dangerous things happened to me when I was drinking, and things that I know were not my fault, even though the world told me they were. And I've personally experienced sexual assault and harassment more than once while I've been drinking.
Mm.
But the way that I was raised, the way that we came up in this culture, taught me that if that happened while I was drinking, that it was somehow on me.
Mm.
And that it was my fault. It was my fault for wearing that. It was my fault for not saying no loud enough. So I didn't talk about it. I shoved it down. I blamed myself. And I kind of want to say this like really clearly for anyone listening, that being drunk doesn't mean that you deserved what happened to you, that drinking doesn't make something like assault or anything like that your fault. And although that's not like the center point to my story, it's very layered. I just feel like it's never talked about. And it's so common. And it doesn't have to be something like you're drinking at a bar and some guy takes you in the back and holds you up to gunpoint. Like I said, we talked about this many times already. It's not like the drama that's played out on TV. It can be like someone you know or a friend, or like just like creepy men like thinking they can touch you for no reason. Like that's happened to me so many times just being at a bar. I'm like, get your hands off me. Like, and I think that takes a toll on us. And it can happen to men too. You know what I mean? Like people, when they're drinking, don't have boundaries. And amongst other things, that's just like one of the bigger things that I feel like resonates with me that's not talked about enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing
Sorry,
that.
distracted.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. What you say there, I think is so valid too, about the layers of things, right? Like at first we hear all the time, right? I just have to quit drinking. I have to quit drinking. That's kind of like the big mountain to climb. And then as we kind of peel back the layers too, it's maybe get a better understanding of what's kind of going on behind the scenes. And I mean, 4 years ago, that's incredible. How have you found things since? What did the early days look like for you, and as you go on through the journey of things?
Well, kind of like how you were talking about, it was quiet. It was not a loud, like dramatic thing, and it was also drinking at that time was not like a regular part of my life. So for me, it was more okay because my like literal life, like work life has been designed around drinking because I've worked in restaurants, because now I'm making money off of doing these classes.
Mm,
I have to figure out something else. So that was kind of a big deal because I basically said to myself, I have to shift what I'm doing. So I started to slowly focus more on just mocktails.
mm,
And again, at the time, it's 2021. It's not like fully the mocktail movement has not popped off yet.
yeah.
Um, and I started to get gigs where people wanted to hire me for just mocktails. I probably went through a period of time where I was really not doing anything with liquor for a year, where I was just like working 40 hours a week, trying to make something happen, cold pitching people every day. Whether I was going to be doing like mocktail making workshops or classes for them in person, applying to do events like festivals and whatever, and I just like wasn't getting anything. It was that weird in between period where it was like early 2021, people weren't like fully back outside yet and doing things. And so it was a really hard year financially because I was making this transition and like the world was still figuring itself out. And then I finally started to like get these big gigs. I got Newport Folk Festival, which is a big festival out here, doing mocktails for the festival and backstage. I got like really exclusive experiences like right off the bat. But again, it took time. I got to do Burton Snowboards company party every year, and like got in these experiences and opportunities that like I didn't really anticipate because I was on it, I think, really early. And I was doing pop-up mocktail bars and, like I said, classes and other things. So sobriety wasn't like a hard thing for me to do, but it was still taboo. Like I felt uncomfortable talking about it because people were like, "Oh, you don't drink?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I like run this mocktail bar situation, and I guess I could do that drinking, but it sort of doesn't feel congruent to continue drinking and doing
Yeah.
this." So it wasn't hard for me. It wasn't like, and I've talked about this before, it wasn't this situation where I hit rock bottom, where I stopped drinking and lost 30 pounds and balanced out my hormones and got the job of my dreams and started making millions. Like, that's not the case. That wasn't
Mhm.
what happened. It was sort of like I was already in a really self isolating situation. The world was in a self isolating situation. So it was kind of easy for me to not be drinking. Um, and I just know that I never look back. Like I just know that it was a experience in my life that I had. You know, I think about it like an ex-boyfriend, like it was a great experience, but I've grown from it and it was right in the time, but we are on different paths and that's just how it is. And I think some people have a great relationship with alcohol. If I were the type of person who could make some really beautiful medicinal elixirs and have like a really cool herbal cordial that I drank every once in a while, I think that would be phenomenal. But that's unfortunately not me, even though I've healed my nervous system a ton and done tons of therapy and energy work and all sorts of things to dig up the skeletons in my closet.
Mm.
I just don't even want to go there. You know, like you don't want to go back to your ex. Like you did it, you're done. I appreciate it. It was challenging, but like we're moving forward is kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
Um, because people ask me that actually all the time. They're like, "Well, would you think about going back?" I'm like, "No, I wouldn't." You
Isn't
know?
it? Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that too. You brought up there that at the end, right? It's just so interesting, right? Because some people are, I don't know what it is. Like, they're just like, why don't you just have one or whatever? Like, I don't get this really anymore. But it's like, what for me in my life today, it just makes absolutely no sense. And there was a point in time where alcohol made all the sense. It just
Right.
doesn't make any sense to just go and gamble with that. Like when you get away from it, you get that true clarity of seeing it for what it is. I always look at it like people with, like say somebody you're at a gathering or something and people are smoking. I mean, you don't ever have a person who's smoking offering cigarettes to people who are not smoking.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've never seen that. But it's with alcohol, and it kind of goes back, I think, to like even the beginning of your story, just to how normalized it is, right? So it's just like, oh yeah, do you want to drink this? But then when we know on this side of things, okay, this is disastrous. I mean, it's poisonous for humans and all this stuff we learn. And it's like, no, I don't have any interest
Right.
in going back to the way things were, and it seems to take people off guard though sometimes, because I think when you're wrapped up in it, it's like, oh my goodness, I don't know if our brain has the capacity to even think that that's a possibility. I know I sure as heck didn't. If I
Right.
knew somebody that didn't drink, I'm like, that's the weirdest, craziest thing I've
Right.
ever heard of in my life. But when you're on this side, it's like drinking again is the weirdest, craziest thing that I hear
I
some
know.
days. Um, Great stuff. And I love that too, that you shared continuing sort of that other work too of things and how it's been. And I always, taught with people all day, every day for years about the journey. So many different stories about kind of what brought people to that moment of getting things started, how their life has been since. And it's always really interesting to me, sort of how people move forward too with their life, but you continuing to work on things and just further improve all areas of our life, I think is really helpful to keep us on the path for where we're going. And you mentioned it too, like if there was a perfect world where you could mix up these fancy drinks and have one and stuff, but you just kind of described my romanticization for a long time, a world where I could drink like a gentleman, you know
Right.
but I got to the spot where I'm just like, man, I tried it all. I tried so many different ways to make it work. And it's so much easier for me to have none than to go back trying to
Right.
figure this out or that out. Like that was exhausting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, I tried every way to make it healthy and okay. But I never could until I started making my own stuff using herbs. That was the only way that I could do it without alcohol. So, being that I have a clinical herbalism and bartending background, and that's the next stage of my business right now, after doing the mocktail bars and the mocktail classes, I found that a lot of the drinks that I was making or products I was buying from other people, and you probably, I don't know if you drink mocktails or you're just, are a seltzer drinker. Everybody has their fix now.
Yeah.
But a lot of the mocktails out there, I was like, okay, they're high in sugar and all of them are claiming benefits and I don't feel anything. And unfortunately for these companies, I have a background in clinical herbalism. So I know how they're formulating and what they're putting in this. For example, and I always tell people this when I do podcasts, reserve adaptogens for supplements, not for drinks. This is like the most overplayed word right now. Adaptogens are basically a category of herbs that help to acclimate the body to stress. And you'll even see it on like granola bars or whatever. Adaptogens are like the cool hot word. Ashwagandha is probably the most famous one. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
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 So adaptogens take weeks to work. So you need to take them consistently. And when you're seeing mocktail products that say they're formulated with adaptogens, that is like marketing manipulation because half of the time there are adaptogens that are in there that the dose is insignificant, or they're claiming herbs to be adaptogens that are not. And they're not saying that you need to drink this drink every single day for at least 6 weeks. They're claiming that you'll feel mood boosting effects immediately.
Mm.
So to me, I was like, that's a lot of shit. Or that's like, that's manipulation. They're not being honest.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started formulating my own stuff.
Way over my head, but I'm following you. I'm following you with it. So, I mean, this is definitely your passion and probably safe to say your purpose, kind of part of it,
Yeah.
of getting this stuff out there and building this. It's always interesting too. You kind of mentioned too, like 21, right? Kind of like maybe right before things kind of tipped over for mocktail, non-alc space, stuff like that. So it's yeah, I mean, it was really cool. You kind of had some insight there on, it's almost always weird to me with timing, right? Like how we look at our stories and our lives and how this timing, and this is sort of what you're really fired up about these days and how it, kind of came when
Right.
things were about to head in this direction. Just thinking about wrapping up here shortly too, is there anything you would leave people with that are struggling to get or stay sober, or maybe people in their after their first year? I mean, stuff they could, that you could take from your own journey to share with them.
I would probably say that the healing is the most important step. And we have a tendency to hyper focus on the health and wellness aspect of it, like the swapping out for, a seltzer water instead of a beer, or the supplements and the workout routine. And while all of those are immensely important,
Yeah.
doing the inner work is like the most important thing. Like you can't green juice, yoga, and breath work your way into healing. That will help your body, but you really got to like dig in and do the inner work. And that looks different for everyone. So whether that's seeing a therapist, maybe it's like somatic therapy, I don't know. Everybody can be their own thing. It doesn't have to be that. It could be journaling, it could be nature, walking outside in nature.
Yeah.
But the inner healing and like the deep work and the inner reflection, I think, is the piece that sometimes gets forgotten, and it ends up going straight into like, I finally worked out. Like we get into like the aesthetic obsession, like now I have the body that I want, or I've lost the weight that I want, and like the health benefits, which are, like I said, all great and I don't diminish them, but don't forget your soul. And there's one of these, it's called a Zen story, but basically it's all about this man who has like five wives. And in the story, he basically is dying, and each of his wives like basically ditches him except for one. And I don't know if this story is going to hit, but basically the moral of the story is we take so much of our life, we spend so much of it pleasing other people, attaching ourselves to the aesthetic or this, that, and the other thing. But the only person that's going to be with you at the end of the day, like crossing over, I guess, on your deathbed is your soul. So, like, yeah, you can have the perfect body, but you leave that behind. You can, like, have the great job, but you're going to leave that behind. You can have the great family and the, girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever,
Yeah.
but, like, you are the only one with you, like, when you die. And hopefully that's not like harsh, but
Actually, you know what? It's the truth. It is, I could go on for kind of maybe an hour or so in that direction, because I think there's just so much importance to that, because like a lot of us get into the thing about giving up the drinking and getting sober. But I think that to stay sober, because that's what people always ask me, Brad, how do you get sober? Well, just don't drink. I mean, I don't know what else. That's really it. It's that simple. Don't drink. But the bigger question and the right question is, how do I stay sober? And I think the healing, kind of feel it to heal it. You got to go through that, right? And like you mentioned there, get support from somewhere else. And it can be many different ways of people plug into support groups or therapy or more traditional stuff, or maybe some sort of outside of the box stuff, whatever is working for you to plug in, right? Because I do believe if we don't engage in that healing process, we'll end up potentially back to where we were
mm,
before, if we're not plugging into that stuff. It's taken me years. I mean, I'm still into it 15 years later. I mean, I'm still like uncovering like, oh, whoa, what's that all about? Right. What's going on here? And I'll probably forever be, hopefully in that journey of, improvement and awareness and just staying open to have a look at things. It does take time, but I think that's good. And you're right. We do attach everything else at times to things around us, and people pleasing comes up so often in people's stories. And, we forget about ourselves to look after ourselves and take care of ourselves and just do everything for everybody else. So I think that's an important message to wrap things up. Well, thank you, Torie, so much. We'll I'll drop the information, everything where people can get a hold of you and check out all this incredible stuff you've got going on too. Any final thoughts?
I love sharing stuff on my email list, and I love pumping out cool information on my social at T for Torie. And yeah, thank you, Brad, for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Torie.
Thank you.
Well, there it is, everyone. Another incredible episode here on the podcast. Thank you so much, Torie, for sharing. I'll drop the contact information for Torie down in the show notes below. Good to get back to the stories. The updates were great too. Got a lot more that are going to come out as we go along here, but wanted to bring a story back into the mix since that's a big part of why we're all here. If you enjoy the show and you have yet to leave a review, please jump over to Apple or Spotify and drop a written review or even a 5 stars. Either or, 5 stars all day. And I'll see you on the next one.